Allow your thoughts to settle now, and let the weight of the day begin to dissolve. There is no need to follow every word, only to let the voice become a part of the quiet. It is enough to listen, or not to listen, as sleep begins to draw near. If the quiet companionship of this channel suits your nights, you may choose to subscribe or leave a like. There is no urgency, only an open invitation should you wish to return. The medieval mind, in its slow and deliberate turnings, began to notice the body, not as a temple but as a complex and poorly assembled mechanism, left without instructions. It was discovered that the skin could be parted with relative ease, revealing an interior world of mysterious function, a world of pulsing wetness and strange, interdependent forms. This was not a revelation that led immediately to healing. It led instead to a new and terrible confidence. The confidence of a mapmaker who has drawn the first lines of a continent, but understands nothing of its climate or its dangers. Armed with this fragile knowledge, and with instruments of sharpened steel, the medieval surgeon approached the human form. There was no anesthesia, only the crude and total silencing of the senses through alcohol or blunt force. The concept of hygiene was a distant rumor, unheard in the crowded, earth-floored rooms where these procedures unfolded. Speed was the only virtue that mattered. The goal was to be done before the patient succumbed to shock, or before the inevitable infection set in with its fevered certainty. If the patient survived the cutting, the wound, the bleeding, it was seen as a triumph of technique, or more often, divine favor. If the patient died, it was simply the expected outcome of a risky endeavor. A shrug of the soul, and a movement toward the next willing or unwilling subject. This anatomical curiosity did not confine itself to the repair of injury. It blossomed into a colder study, the measurement of pain. It was found that suffering was not a single, blunt event. Could be calibrated, could be refined. It could be drawn out into stages, each with its own particular texture of agony. The body, now understood as a system of levers and tensions, of fragile bones and sensitive nerves, became a laboratory for this grim research. The breaking of a bone was a sudden, sharp conclusion. The stretching of joints, however, was a slower, more articulate language of distress. Professional torturers and executioners were not brutes. They were technicians. Their craft demanded an understanding of thresholds, of how much a body could endure before consciousness fled, or before life itself gave way. The objective was rarely a quick death. The objective was the experience of pain, prolonged and expertly administered, until it served its purpose. A confession, a punishment, a warning to those who watched. And the crowds did watch. They gathered in public squares as if for a market or a festival. They observed with a focused attention, learning the new grammar of power written upon the trembling body of another. The lesson was simple, and it was learned deeply. Pain was a tool, and a tool, once discovered, is not easily forgotten. It is merely improved. Around the same time, in the close quarters of towns and within the thin walls of houses, another pattern was reluctantly observed. Sickness traveled. It passed from one person to the next with a dreadful reliability. A cough in one household would soon become a chorus in the next street over. This discovery did not bring clarity, but a thick, cloying fear. Fear that turned neighbor against neighbor. Fear that sealed doors and shuttered windows. The sick were isolated, not with compassion, but with the frantic logic of containment. They were walled into their homes, with food sometimes passed through a gap in the stones, sometimes not. The well avoided the ill, and the ill were left to listen to the retreating footsteps of the world. In the absence of understanding, blame rushed in to fill the void. The sickness was said to come from bad air, from misaligned stars, from the moral failings of the afflicted, or from the deliberate poisoning of outsiders and minorities. The discovery of contagion did not lead to a cure. It led to suspicion, persecution, and a profound loneliness that permeated the very stones of the cities. And the air itself, once considered a simple and generous gift, was found to be untrustworthy. Miners entered deep tunnels and did not return. Alchemists leaned over their bubbling vessels and were overtaken by sudden weakness, or by a slow, confusing decline. In workshops where leather was tanned and metals were smelted, thick vapors hung in the air, and those who breathed them daily found their strength shortening year by year. The air could be poisonous, could be a quiet, invisible killer. The response was not ventilation, but ritual. Herbs were burned to cleanse the spirit of the air. Bells were rung to drive away the malady. The truth was half-glimpsed, but clothed in a misunderstanding so complete that it offered no real protection. They knew the air was dangerous, but they believed it was angry, and it is difficult to negotiate with an atmosphere that holds a grudge. There were substances that seemed to promise great things, whose very behavior suggested a hidden power. Mercury, for instance, a liquid metal, shining like a silver tear, moving with a sentient grace. It was mesmerizing. It was taken internally as a medicine, applied to wounds as a salve, rubbed into the skin as a treatment for ailments of every kind. The patient would develop a tremor, a slurring of speech, an erosion of the mind. This was not seen as poisoning. It was interpreted as the disease being violently driven from the body. The more dramatic the reaction, the more effective the cure was believed to be. Alchemists inhaled its fumes in their pursuit of transformational secrets, and wondered why their hands shook and their thoughts clouded. The pursuit of beauty also embraced it, using mercury compounds to create a pale, fashionable complexion. The skin might achieve a ghostly whiteness, even as the nervous system began its long, silent unraveling. Activity was mistaken for efficacy. The substance did something, and in a world of uncertain remedies, that was enough. Then there was lead. Soft, malleable, resistant to corrosion. It was the perfect material for so many things. Pipes to carry drinking water, cisterns to store wine, plates and cups for the table, a sweetening agent for sour wine, a white powder for the face. It was everywhere, in everything, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, it seeped into the body. It brought with it a fog of confusion, irritability, and chronic pain. It dulled the wits of scholars and the vitality of children. But the cause was invisible and the effect was slow. To question lead would have been to question the very fabric of daily life, the pipes, the vessels, the cosmetics, the trade. It was easier to blame a melancholic disposition, or an imbalance of the bodily humors, or a personal failure of character. Generations lived and died within this gentle, pervasive toxicity, never knowing the source of their collective malaise. The discovery of a material's usefulness had far outpaced the understanding of its danger. Authority, in its medieval form, made its own quiet discovery. It learned that fear was a more efficient governor than fairness. A complex legal system required judges, scribes, evidence, and time. Fear required only a single vivid example. Public punishment, therefore, became a cornerstone of order. It was not merely the infliction of pain upon a guilty individual. It was a theater of consequence, staged in the central square for the education of all. The goal was to make the crowd think with a deep and visceral certainty, "I will never do that." The punishment itself, be it flogging, mutilation, or execution, was performed with a deliberate pace. It was meant to be observed, absorbed, and remembered. Fairness in the trial was secondary to the impact of the spectacle. A forced confession served the purpose as well as a true one, if the resulting punishment achieved its aim of spreading a uniform dread through the populace. The crowd became a part of the mechanism, their witnessed horror the true engine of control. And from this, a subtler discovery emerged. People did not just tolerate these spectacles. They attended them with a kind of grim enthusiasm. Markets would pause. Families would attend together. Vendors sold food and drink. The suffering of the condemned was not a private affair. It was a communal experience. This led to the refined use of humiliation. Pain was temporary, but shame could be lasting. The stocks and the pillory placed the offender at eye level, exposed to the weather and to the ridicule of their community. They were pelted with rotten food, mocked, and spat upon. Their identity was stripped away, replaced by the single, defining label of criminal. This destruction of dignity was often more effective than any physical torment. It taught the offender their place, and it taught the crowd the pleasure of shared judgment, of unity forged in collective disdain. It reassured them that the social order was intact, that rules were being enforced, and that they, for now, were safely on the side of the enforcers. Fire, that most ancient of tools, was also re-examined. It was discovered that its primary domestic uses, warmth, light, cooking, could be inverted into a weapon of terrifying efficiency. A city, with its wooden structures and thatched roofs, was not just a collection of buildings. It was a reservoir of potential fuel. Siege warfare incorporated this knowledge. Flaming arrows, pots of burning pitch, and mysterious compounds like Greek fire, which burned even on water, could turn a defended wall into a trap. The psychological effect was immediate and total. Courage was irrelevant against an element that consumed everything in its path. Defenders no longer thought of military strategy. They thought of escape. The very composition of cities began to change slowly in response, stone replacing wood where possible. But the knowledge was now loose in the world. Fire could erase a city, not just capture it. Victory could mean leaving nothing behind worth claiming. In the quiet, dark spaces of dungeons and oubliettes, another principle was uncovered. Authorities found that the human mind could be broken more thoroughly than the body. Prolonged isolation, uncertainty, sensory deprivation, these were tools of a different sort. A prisoner left in absolute darkness, without human contact or knowledge of time, would often unravel in ways that physical torture could not achieve. They would talk to walls, retreat into silence, or become pliant and obedient. The mind, deprived of anchor points, would turn inward and consume itself. This was a cheap and efficient form of control. It required no expensive equipment, no skilled torturer. It required only a door, a lock, and patience. The goal shifted from extracting a specific confession to eroding the will entirely, creating a vacant vessel that would agree to anything for the mere hint of relief. This discovery, too, would have a long legacy. Belief itself became a territory to be mapped and manipulated. It was observed that people were remarkably willing to allow abstract systems to dictate concrete actions. Astrology provided a clear framework. The movements of planets and stars were consulted for the timing of medical procedures, the launching of battles, the signing of treaties. A surgeon might delay an operation because the celestial alignment was unfavorable. A king might postpone a coronation. This lent an air of intellectual certainty to decisions. Complex charts and tables created the illusion of control over a chaotic world. If a patient died under the knife, it was not the surgeon's fault. It was the will of Mars. This transfer of agency was comforting. It removed the burden of responsibility and the sting of failure. Belief, when shared widely enough, became a kind of fact. It shaped reality because it dictated what people did and how they interpreted the outcomes. To question the system was not to question a bad idea. It was to question the cosmic order itself. And with that understanding came a corollary. Certain ideas were dangerous. Not because they were false, but because they threatened the structures that held society together. Books, with their ability to preserve and spread thoughts across time and distance, became objects of suspicion. A dangerous idea could outlive its author, could be copied and passed from hand to hand, could not be intimidated or imprisoned, so the ideas themselves had to be controlled. Texts were banned, burned, or quietly removed from libraries. This censorship, in turn, made the forbidden knowledge more tantalizing. People learned to whisper, to self-censor, to understand where the invisible boundaries of thought were drawn. Curiosity did not vanish, but it learned to move quietly, to avoid the light. The control of knowledge became another method of control, more subtle than the rack or the blade, but no less effective. The body, it was finally noted, kept a record. Punishment could be made permanent. Branding, mutilation, the removal of an ear or the slitting of a nose, these were not just painful penalties. They were living, lasting sentences. A branded man carried his crime on his face for the rest of his life. He became a walking warning. No further prison was needed. Society itself would enforce his exile. Shopkeepers would refuse him. Neighbors would cross the street. The mark rendered him forever other, a permanent lesson etched in flesh. This was cost-effective and brutally efficient. It also created a society trained to judge instantly, without context or mercy. Children learned to read these bodily signs as clearly as they learned language. A missing finger meant thief. A scarred forehead meant blasphemer. The system was irreversible. A wrongful accusation, once acted upon with hot iron or sharp knife, could never be taken back. The body remembered what the law sometimes forgot. In the midst of all this, a deeply unfortunate correlation was made. It was noticed during times of plague that people who bathed sometimes fell ill afterward. The correct conclusion that bathhouses were crowded vectors of disease was not reached. Instead, the conclusion was that water itself was dangerous, that it opened the pores and invited sickness in. Cleanliness, therefore, was seen as a vulnerability. Dirt, by contrast, was rebranded as a protective layer. The logic was comforting in its simplicity. To be safe, one must simply cease to wash. Public bathhouses declined. Physicians warned against the dangers of warm water. Perfumes and heavy robes were used to mask the consequences of this philosophy. The result was a society that was not merely dirty, but proudly medically filthy. Poor hygiene, of course, worsened every outbreak of disease, which only reinforced the belief that cleanliness was the original sin. The misunderstanding was total, and it would persist for centuries. The final, overarching discovery of the medieval period was perhaps the most subtle and the most enduring. It was the realization that learning something does not mean understanding what to do with it. Knowledge arrived in fragments, out of sequence, without the accompanying wisdom of safety or ethics. The map of the human body was drawn long before the principles of antiseptic surgery were conceived. The utility of fear was mastered long before the concepts of justice and rehabilitation. The toxicity of lead and mercury was experienced by generations before it was understood. There was a relentless curiosity, a drive to cut, to test, to measure, to control. But the direction of this curiosity was shaped by the values already in place: authority, order, control, and a stark hierarchy of human life. In a system built on power, new knowledge simply became a sharper tool for the enforcement of that power. It amplified what was already there. The cost of this disconnect was written on the landscape, in the emptied villages after plague, in the chronic pain of lead-poisoned artisans, in the silent trauma of broken minds in forgotten cells. Progress, when it came, was not a straight line from ignorance to enlightenment. It was a slow, meandering, and often cruel path where every gain in understanding was shadowed by a new method of suffering. The medieval world was not fumbling in darkness. It was looking intently, with a focused and often ruthless curiosity, at the mechanisms of the world and of the human being. It just looked several centuries too early for the moral framework that might have guided its hand. And so it learned, and it recorded, and it experimented, leaving behind a legacy of foundations, both brutal and brilliant, upon which later ages would uneasily build. The night in a medieval city, after such discoveries had been made but not yet softened by time, was a different kind of quiet. It was not an absence of sound, but a presence of withheld breath. The cough from a neighboring house was no longer just a cough. It was a potential sentence. The glow from a watchman's brazier was not just light. It was a reminder of the order maintained by fear. The smell of smoke on the air could be from a humble hearth, or from the last embers of a punished heretic's pyre. Knowledge had changed the texture of reality. It had made the world more legible, but also more fraught. The body was known to be fragile. The air was known to be suspect. The authorities were known to be creative in their enforcement. And so people moved through their days with a certain watchfulness, a certain reserve. They locked their doors a little earlier. They regarded strangers with a more calculating eye. They performed the rituals, the hanging of herbs, the avoidance of bathwater, the consultation of star charts, not with absolute faith, but with the desperate hope that routine might impose a shield against a world that had revealed itself to be full of hidden knives and invisible poisons. In the countryside, the darkness was more complete, but the discoveries felt more distant. The peasant in his field did not worry about the precise calibration of pain or the theories of anatomical humors. He worried about the damp in his bones, the yield of the harvest, the weight of the Lord's tax. Yet the repercussions reached even there. A new tax to fund a war using Greek fire. A traveling peddler turned away at the village boundary for fear of bringing plague. The local lord employing branding as punishment for poaching. The great discoveries of the age trickled down into daily life as new forms of anxiety, new rules, new reasons for fear. Life went on as it always does. Bread was baked. Children were born. The seasons turned. But the underpinnings of that life had been subtly altered. The world was no longer a place of mysterious wonders and divine punishments. It was becoming a system, a complex machine whose parts were being identified one by one. And once a thing is seen as a machine, someone will always try to take it apart, or try to make it run more efficiently for their own purposes. Inside a monastery, the rhythm was different. The hours were marked by prayer, not by the market bell or the public execution. Here, the pursuit of knowledge was directed toward God. Scribes copied ancient texts, preserving not only scripture but sometimes the very classical knowledge that would later fuel the Renaissance. In the scriptorium, with its smell of parchment and ink, the concerns of the outside world, the surgeons and the torturers, the alchemists and the inquisitors, felt like a distant murmur. Yet even here the discoveries seeped in. A monk might copy a medical text describing the four humors or an astrological chart. He might treat his brothers in the infirmary with remedies based on mercury or lead. The monastery was not an island, but a slower, more deliberate version of the world outside. Its discoveries were of a spiritual and intellectual nature, but they were still discoveries. The quiet realization that faith could be studied, systematized, and debated. That heresy was not just a sin, but a wrong turn in a logical argument. Even in the pursuit of the divine, the medieval mind applied its characteristic urge to map, to categorize, to understand. And so the years passed, one into the next, with a slow, sedimentary accumulation of these hard-won truths. Each generation inherited the knowledge of the one before, along with the consequences. A city might rebuild in stone after a great fire. A medical text might add a footnote questioning the use of a certain poison. A legal code might refine the definition of torture. The changes were incremental, often invisible to those living through them. The woman drawing water from a lead-lined cistern did not know she was being poisoned. The man watching a punishment in the square did not consider himself part of a psychological experiment. They were simply living, navigating the world as they found it, using the tools and understanding they had been given. The great discoveries were not events with clear beginnings and ends. They were slow dawnings, spreading like a stain across the collective mind of an age. They were the background against which all other lives were lived, the unchallenged assumptions, the accepted truths, the normal ways of doing things that would, centuries later, look like profound and terrible ignorance. The night deepens, and the boundaries between these times and our own grow less distinct. The specific fears may have changed, but the pattern of discovery remains. A new understanding, seized upon, applied without full comprehension, leaving a trail of unintended consequences in its wake. The human body is still being mapped, now down to the very code of its cells. New tools of control, far more subtle than the rack, are still being refined. Substances are still embraced for their utility, their dangers realized only later. The air is still a concern, though now for different, more chemical reasons. The discovery that knowledge outpaces wisdom is not a medieval problem. It is a human one. The voice that speaks of these things does so not to bring alarm, but to note the pattern, the slow rhythm of learning and erring that seems to be the constant tempo of history. It is a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat, as inevitable as the turning of the earth into darkness, and then back toward the light again. Outside, the wind moves through the streets, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. A lone candle gutters in a high window, its light a small, defiant gesture against the vastness of the night. Somewhere, a dog barks, the sound sharp and lonely in the stillness. The watchman makes his rounds, his footsteps echoing on the cobbles, a familiar sound that marks the passage of the hours without urgency. In the rooms above, people sleep or try to sleep. Their dreams are their own, untouched by the grand narratives of discovery and power. They dream of small things, a lost object, a familiar face, a field under sunlight. The concerns of the waking world recede, replaced by the older, more private landscapes of the mind. And for a few hours the world is simple again. It is just the dark, and the quiet, and the slow, patient waiting for the dawn. The dawn, when it comes, does not arrive with a sudden burst of color or sound. It arrives as a gradual softening, a dilution of the darkness into shades of gray and a cold, pale blue. The outlines of rooftops emerge first, the steep angles of thatch and the irregular lines of timbered houses becoming distinct against the lightening sky. In the streets, the night's dampness clings to the cobblestones, making them shine faintly with a slick, muted gleam. The air is still, holding the chill close to the ground. No birds sing yet. Their chorus is a later luxury, reserved for when the light has grown more substantial. For now, there is only the slow, almost imperceptible shift from one state of being to another. A servant, rising long before the household, moves silently through a lower kitchen, coaxing embers back to life in the hearth. The small crackle of the fire is a private sound, a tiny rebellion against the quiet. He breathes in the smell of cold ash and the musty scent of stored root vegetables. His world, in this moment, is confined to the task of creating warmth, of preparing for the day's demands that will soon cascade through the sleeping rooms above. His thoughts are not of anatomy or contagion, but of the weight of the water bucket he must soon fetch, and the hope that the bread dough left to rise overnight has not soured. In a room above, a woman stirs. She has not slept well. The familiar ache in her joints is more pronounced in the cold hour before dawn. She listens to the shallow, rhythmic breathing of her husband beside her, and further off, the softer sounds of her children. For a moment, she simply lies there, enclosed by the dark, assessing the shape of the day to come. There is the milking, the feeding of the chickens, the mending of a tunic torn yesterday. There is the market, if she feels brave enough to navigate the crowds and the judging eyes of the other wives. There is the persistent worry about the cough her youngest developed 2 days prior, a dry, tight sound that seems to catch in the child's small chest. She has hung rosemary over the door and burned a sprig of juniper on the hearth, as her own mother taught her. She knows the learned men in the city speak of bad air and planetary influence. Her knowledge is more immediate. The child is feverish, and the local wise woman is expensive, and the priest is busy with a death in the next parish. Her discovery, made anew each day, is the sheer weight of mundane responsibility, the constant calculation of risk and resource. She rises, her feet touching the cold rushes of the floor, and wraps a shawl tightly around her shoulders before moving to the small window. She looks out at the gray world, watching the shapes become things. It is a daily ritual of reorientation, of stepping from the private realm of worry back into the visible, tangible world. Across the city, in a street where the craftsmen live, a different kind of waking occurs. The potter, his hands already stained with the memory of clay from 1,000 previous days, lights a lamp in his workshop. The space is crowded with the ghosts of future objects. Rows of unfired vessels on shelves, sacks of powdered minerals for glazes, the great, silent wheel. His work is a dialogue with earth and fire, a process of transformations he controls but does not fully understand. He knows that adding a certain lead compound to his glaze will produce a brilliant, glossy green, coveted by the wealthier merchants. He does not know, not in any way he could articulate, that the dust of that compound, inhaled over years as he mixes and applies it, is settling deep in his bones, bringing with it a fatigue and a fog that he attributes to hard work and God's will. His discovery is practical, tactile. He learned through trial and error the exact consistency of clay needed to throw a perfect pitcher. He learned which woods burn hottest for his kiln. The knowledge in this room is stored in his muscles and his instincts, not in books. He begins to wedge a lump of clay, the repetitive, forceful motion a prelude to creation. The workshop fills with the earthy, damp smell of the material, a smell that means home and livelihood. Outside, the world of ideas and powers and discoveries feels distant. Here, there is only the next pot, the next firing, the next small mastery over an element. The light strengthens, bleeding gold into the gray. Now the birds begin, their songs stitching the morning together. The sounds of the city awaken in layers. First the solitary calls of the watchmen ending their shifts, then the scrape of shutters being opened, the rumble of the first cart bringing goods from the countryside, the distant lowing of cattle being driven to pasture outside the walls. Smoke begins to rise from 100 chimneys, drawing vertical lines in the still air. The smell changes, wood smoke overlaying the damp, and beneath it, the less pleasant odors of a community living in close quarters. The tang of waste from the open gutters, the pungent aroma from the tanner's yard by the river. A baker's apprentice, flour already dusting his tunic like a second skin, slides hot loaves from a long peel onto a counter. The scent of baking bread is the most powerful alchemy of the morning, a universal signal of daily renewal. People begin to appear in the streets, their movements purposeful but not hurried. They greet one another with nods, their words condensed in the cold air. Conversations are brief, focused on the immediate, the price of wool, a missing hen, the health of a mutual acquaintance. The grand narratives of the age are absent. What matters is the negotiation for a fair price, the return of a borrowed tool, the sharing of a simple meal. In a room at the top of a stone house near the center of town, a man who calls himself a scholar stares at a page. The parchment is covered in a dense, intricate script, a translation of an ancient text on the movements of the heavens. The lamplight, weak against the growing dawn, pools on the vellum. His eyes are tired. He has been at this task for hours, tracing the logic of thinkers long dead. His discovery is one of connection, of a fragile thread of knowledge passed from hand to hand across centuries and languages. He feels the weight of that responsibility. A single mistranscribed word could distort an entire concept. He also feels the isolation, the world outside his window, the shouts of the fishmonger, the clatter of carts, seems crude, loud, and immediate. His world is one of silent symbols and abstract relationships. He knows the theories about the body's humors, about the influence of the planets on human fate. He can draw a detailed chart mapping the zodiac man. But he also knows, in a quiet, private corner of his mind, that these systems are imperfect. They do not always predict. They do not always heal. The cough that killed his sister last winter was placed under the sign of Saturn, but knowing that did not stop the cough, nor did the bleeding prescribed by the physician. This dissonance is his constant companion. He pursues knowledge not because he believes it to be flawless, but because the pursuit itself imposes an order on the chaos of existence. It is a way of not being afraid. He dips his pen, the nib scratching softly against the parchment, adding another link to the chain. The sun clears the horizon now, a pale disk without warmth. Its light falls across the landscape, revealing details that the gray dawn had hidden. The vibrant green of moss on the north side of a roof, the intricate grain of the wooden beams of a bridge, the way the river catches and fractures the light into 1,000 shimmering pieces. In the fields beyond the walls, peasants are already at work. Their bodies move in rhythms older than cities, older than kings. The turn of the soil, the sowing of seed, the patient waiting for rain and sun. These are discoveries made and remade by every generation. Their knowledge is of the land's moods, the signs of coming weather in the clouds and the behavior of animals, the precise moment when grain is ripe for the sickle. It is a knowledge paid for in sweat and in years. A pain in the back is not a philosophical concept. It is a familiar companion. A blight on the wheat is not an astrological event. It is hunger waiting in the wings. Their interaction with authority is simple and brutal. A portion of what they grow is not theirs. It is taken, by right or by force, to feed the city, to fill the Lord's storehouse, to fund a distant war. They have discovered that fairness is a luxury, and that survival often depends on invisibility, on not being noticed by the tax collector or the recruiting sergeant. Back within the walls, in a quiet side street, an old woman sits on a stool by her door. She is spinning wool. The spindle is steady, whirling descant to the morning's noises. Her fingers, gnarled and deft, guide the fibers into a strong, even thread. She has been doing this since she was a girl. The motion is as natural to her as breathing. She watches the street with eyes that have seen decades of such mornings. She remembers plagues that came and took half the street. She remembers fires that destroyed whole neighborhoods. She remembers the old king and the new king, and the taxes of both. Her discoveries are not written down. They are embodied. They are in the careful way she stores away a bit of extra food when the harvest is good, knowing it will be needed later. They are in the herbal lore stored in her memory, which leaf poultice draws out infection, which tea soothes a troubled stomach. She is the repository of a different kind of knowledge, one passed from mother to daughter, from elder to child, through demonstration and whispered advice. She knows the world is a dangerous and uncertain place. Her philosophy is not one of understanding why, but of endurance. She spins her thread, creating something useful from raw, tangled wool. It is a small, continuous act of defiance against entropy. A child runs past, laughing, and she offers a thin smile, a momentary connection across the vast gap of years. Then she returns to her spinning, her face settling back into its familiar landscape of lines and patience. The morning progresses. The market square is now fully alive, a cacophony of barter and movement. Colors become vivid under the sun. The deep blue of a dyed cloth, the burnished copper of a cookpot, the variegated browns of baskets and pottery. Voices rise and fall in a complex symphony of commerce. Here, the discoveries of the age are traded as commodities. A merchant sells spices from the east, substances that can preserve meat or disguise its taste. An apothecary offers dried herbs and powdered minerals in small linen bags, each promising relief from one of humanity's countless ailments. A scribe, for a fee, will write a letter or a contract, translating spoken agreement into permanent, powerful script. Knowledge here has a price. It is practical, applied, stripped of its theoretical framework. The woman buying a measure of pepper does not care about the trade routes that brought it. She cares that it will make her husband's supper more pleasing. The man purchasing a salve from the apothecary hopes it will ease the ache in his knee. He does not question its ingredients. The market is the engine of everyday life, fueled by need and desire, utterly indifferent to the slow, intellectual revolutions occurring in monasteries and universities. It is a world of surfaces of immediate utility, and it is in many ways the most resilient world of all. In a small, dim chamber attached to the church, the priest prepares for midday mass. He dons his vestments, the fabrics worn thin at the edges from years of use. His discoveries are of a spiritual and pastoral nature. He has learned that faith is not a constant, steady flame, but a flickering thing that needs constant tending. He has learned that people come to him not only for absolution, but for practical advice, for mediation in disputes, for comfort in the face of loss that has no earthly explanation. He has heard countless confessions, a litany of human frailty, petty jealousies, bursts of anger, thefts, lies, moments of weakness. He dispenses penance and forgiveness according to a prescribed system, but he has discovered that the system often feels inadequate to the complexity of the lives before him. He knows the official church stance on heresy, on sin, on the proper order of society. He also knows the woman in his parish who works herself to exhaustion caring for a sick mother, and the man who drinks to forget the son he lost to fever. His theology must stretch to encompass these realities, or it becomes a dry, useless shell. As he lifts the chalice, he feels the weight of his role, a bridge between the divine and the profoundly messily human. The bell begins to toll, its deep, resonant voice calling the faithful. The sound rolls over the rooftops, a momentary imposition of sacred order onto the secular chaos of the day. The sun reaches its zenith, a brief period of direct light that warms the stones of the square and drives the damp from the shadows. People pause in their labors. Some eat simple meals of bread and cheese, sitting on doorsteps or in the lee of a wall. Animals doze in patches of sunlight. For a short while, the pace slackens. It is a hinge in the day, a moment of equilibrium before the long slide toward evening. In a wealthy merchant's house, the family dines in a room set aside for the purpose. The conversation is of business prospects, of a proposed marriage for a daughter, of the latest news from the court. Their discoveries are of power and influence. They have learned that money can buy not just goods but status, protection, a semblance of security. They patronize artists and scholars, not solely from piety or curiosity, but because it burnishes their reputation. They navigate a web of alliances and obligations, understanding that in the world of commerce and politics, loyalty is a currency that fluctuates in value. They are aware of the suffering outside their walls, the beggars at the church door, the sickness in the poorer quarters, but they have discovered distance, both physical and emotional. Their charity is often calculated, a transaction for spiritual credit or social approval. Their world is one of managed risk and cultivated appearance, a carefully constructed edifice designed to keep the chaos of the common world at bay. As the afternoon wears on, the light begins to change again, growing longer and more golden. Shadows stretch across the streets, deepening the grooves between cobblestones. The sounds of labor resume. The rhythmic hammering from the blacksmith's forge, the thump-thump-thump of the fuller beating cloth by the river, the calls of children released from their tasks. In a small schoolroom, a monk teaches a handful of boys their letters. The lesson is one of rote repetition, the chanting of Latin phrases whose meaning is secondary to their sound. For these boys, discovery is a slow, frustrating process of making sense of symbols on a page, of connecting shapes to sounds. It is a privilege, one that may or may not prove useful in their lives. One boy, with a particular intensity in his gaze, finds a thrill in the puzzle, in the moment when a collection of marks suddenly resolves into a word, and a word into an idea. For him, this is a private and profound revelation. He does not know it, but he is touching the same thread the scholar traced earlier, joining a conversation that spans centuries. The other boys fidget, their minds on the game waiting for them in the street outside. Knowledge is not a uniform gift. It lands on different soils with different effects. The woman from the morning is now in her garden plot behind the house, the one assigned to her family by manorial custom. She weeds with a practiced hand, her fingers distinguishing between seedling and intruder without conscious thought. The earth is cool and damp. She feels the sun on the back of her neck. This small square of soil is a realm of direct cause and effect. If she weeds, the vegetables grow. If she neglects them, they are choked. If the weather is kind, there will be food. If it is not, there will be hunger. It is a stark, honest relationship. Here, she is not a subject of a king or a daughter of the church. She is a partner, however unequal, with the natural world. She discovers, season after season, the resilience of life and the inevitability of decay. A beetle crawls across a leaf, and she flicks it away. A cloud passes over the sun, and she feels the momentary chill. These are the events that shape her reality far more than any decree from the castle. She stands, pressing a hand into the small of her back, and surveys her work. It is enough for today. She gathers her tools, a simple wooden trowel, a basket for the weeds, and turns back toward the house, where the evening meal must be started and the children gathered from their play. The potter, his work for the day complete, stands before his cooling kiln. The firing is always a risk. He has done everything correctly. The clay was well wedged, the pieces evenly formed, the kiln stacked with care, the fire raised to the right temperature and held for the right time. But still, the hidden stresses in the clay, an unseen flaw, a sudden draft, can ruin a week's labor in an instant. He will not open it until tomorrow, letting the heat dissipate slowly to avoid thermal shock. So he waits, as he always does, with a mixture of hope and dread. His discovery is that control is always partial. He can master the process but not the outcome. This acceptance is woven into his craft. He washes his hands in a bucket of water, watching the cloud of clay swirl and settle. His muscles ache with a familiar, satisfying fatigue. The light is fading now, and the workshop fills with deep, velvety shadows. He banks the fire in the small brazier he uses for warmth and light, and prepares to close up. The smells of the day, clay, minerals, wood smoke, cling to his clothes and skin. They are the smells of his life. As twilight descends, the city undergoes another transformation. The purposeful energy of the day begins to ebb. Shutters are closed. Fires are lit behind horn windows, casting soft, wavering squares of light onto the darkening streets. The watchmen light their torches at designated points, their flames creating small islands of visibility in the gathering gloom. The sounds become more isolated. A door closing, a cough from an upper room, the distant bark of a dog, the murmur of conversation from within a tavern. The night air brings a sharper chill. People retreat inward, both physically and socially. The public world of the square gives way to the private world of the household. In a dozen cramped rooms, families gather around their hearths. The fire is the center, the source of light, heat, and, if they are fortunate, a simple meal. Stories are told, not of great discoveries or historical events, but of local happenings, remembered relatives, fragments of old tales. Hands are busy with evening tasks, mending, carving, spinning. The children, tired from the day, grow quiet, their eyes heavy. This is the most ancient of rhythms, the drawing of the circle close against the darkness outside. Here, within the circle of firelight, the vast, impersonal forces of the age feel remote. What matters is the warmth, the shared presence, the small, familiar rituals of belonging. The scholar, his eyes straining in the poor light of a single candle, finally sets down his pen. The page is full, he sand. The wet ink, sprinkling fine dust to absorb the excess, then blows it gently away. The candle flame dips and sways with his breath, sending elongated shadows dancing across the rough plaster of the wall. The effort of the day is a weight behind his eyes, a dull pressure. He knows he should rest, but there is a compulsion to review the work, to trace the lines of argument one more time, to ensure the logic holds from one fragile sentence to the next. The silence of the room is profound, a cottony quiet that seems to absorb sound. From far below, the faintest echo of laughter drifts up from the tavern, a reminder of a world that operates on simpler, more visceral principles. He feels the separation acutely. The knowledge he transcribes is a cold, hard currency. It does not warm the hands or fill the stomach. It exists in a realm of abstractions, of causes and correspondences that promise and order the chaotic street outside consistently denies. He rubs his temples. A phrase from the text returns to him, a discussion on the nature of melancholic humors and their influence on creative thought. He wonders idly if his own persistent headache is a symptom of an imbalance, or simply the result of hours spent hunched over in bad light. The discovery he makes night after night is the loneliness of the intellect. To see patterns is to be separated from those who simply live within them. He extinguishes the candle, plunging the room into a darkness so complete it feels solid. He does not move immediately, allowing his eyes to adjust to the absence, listening to the slow rhythm of his own breathing in the dark. Outside, the night watch makes its rounds. Two men walk the prescribed route, their footsteps a synchronized, monotonous beat on the cobbles. The light from their horn lanterns carves out a small, moving pocket of visibility, illuminating the base of a wall, the iron ring of a hitching post, the sudden gleam of eyes from an alley cat before it vanishes. Their conversation is sparse, functional. They speak of the cold, of a missing gutter tile that made one of them slip earlier, of the baker's wife who has been ill. They are not thinking of the grand architecture of power they uphold. They are thinking of the end of their shift, of the warmth of their own beds. Their discovery is one of mundane vigilance. They have learned the normal sounds of the night, the particular creak of a certain sign, the way the wind sighs through a narrow passage, so that any abnormality, the scrape of a shutter where no shutter should be moving, the muffled sound of activity where there should be quiet, immediately triggers a deep, instinctive alarm. They are the sensory organs of the sleeping city. They see nothing of the great labyrinth of authority. They simply walk its outermost wall. One of them pauses to relight his pipe, the sudden flare of the tinder illuminating his weathered face for an instant. a map of years etched around eyes that have grown accustomed to peering into shadows. Then the light dies down to the steady glow of the pipe bowl, a tiny, moving ember in the vast dark. In a small house by the tannery, the air carries a permanent, acrid tinge, even with the windows shut fast. A family sits in near darkness, conserving the expensive candles. The mother rocks a fussy infant, her murmurs a low, steady melody against the child's thin cries. The father stares into the peat fire on the hearth, his face impassive. The day's work at the tannery is a brutal assault on the senses, a world of foul liquids, heavy hides, and physical labor that leaves his hands raw and his lungs feeling coated. His discovery is the arithmetic of survival. The wages are barely sufficient. The illness of a child means the apothecary must be paid, which means less food or a debt incurred. The constant calculation is exhausting. He sees no path upward, only a fragile, lateral movement from one day to the next, hoping to avoid the catastrophe that will break the precarious balance. The infant's cries subside into whimpers, then into the uneven breathing of sleep. The mother lays the child in a cradle made from an old barrel and begins to mend a pair of hose, her fingers moving by touch as much as sight. No one speaks. The room is filled with the silence of shared fatigue, of energy spent. Their world is not one of ideas, but of substance. The weight of a water bucket, the texture of coarse bread, the piercing sound of a child's cry, the stubborn, grinding ache in the small of the back. The discoveries here are immediate and somatic. They have learned that rest is a commodity as precious as grain, and that sleep, when it finally comes, is a temporary reprieve, not a true escape. High in the castle on the hill, light still spills from several windows. In a chamber hung with tapestries that depict hunting scenes now faded to muted blues and greens, a lord reviews accounts with his steward. The figures on the parchment speak of yields and taxes, of rents collected and rents in arrears, of expenses for the household guard and repairs to the mill. The lord's discovery is the infrastructure of dominion. Power is not merely the ability to command men in battle. It is this quiet, relentless administration of resources. It is the knowledge of how much grain is in the storehouses, how many men can be called to arms, how much silver is available to pay them. It is a web of obligations and dependencies. The knight who holds a parcel of land owes military service. The peasant who works a strip of field owes a portion of his crop. The town owes a yearly fee for its charter. The lord, in turn, owes loyalty and protection to a greater lord above him. It is a system of nested boxes, each reliant on the others. The steward points to a line, mentions a village that has failed to meet its full quota due to sickness. The lord frowns, considers. The decision is not one of mercy, but of long-term strategy. To press too hard is to risk abandonment of the land, which yields nothing. To show leniency is to risk expectations of further leniency. He dictates a response, a temporary reduction, with the expectation of repayment next season. The steward notes it down. The transaction is complete. The human suffering behind the notation, the fever, the empty larders, the fear is an abstraction, a variable in a logistical equation. The fire in the grate crackles, a comfortable, domestic sound at odds with the cold arithmetic of governance being conducted before it. In the infirmary of the monastery, a different kind of watch is being kept. A monk sits by the pallet of an elderly brother who is dying. It is not a dramatic death, not one of plague or violence, but a slow, quiet ebbing. The old man's breathing is shallow and irregular. The monk's duty is to pray, to offer the rituals of passage, to ensure the soul is properly attended. But he also simply sits, bearing witness. His discovery, through years in this room, is the sheer variety of ways the body relinquishes its hold on life. Some fight, some seem to simply let go. Some are afraid, some are calm. This one appears weary, as if life is a burden he is finally permitted to set down. The monk has also learned the limits of the herbal remedies and the prayers. They can comfort, they can sometimes rally the body for a time, but they cannot stop this final, inevitable transition. He feels no despair at this knowledge, only a deepened sense of humility. The mystery of death is not solved by his texts. It is encountered intimately and repeatedly, in this hushed room with its smells of incense, medicinal herbs, and the faint, metallic scent of mortality. He reaches out and adjusts the blanket over the old man's still form, a gesture of practical care that transcends theology. The only light is from a single oil lamp, its flame steady and small, casting a peaceful golden glow over the scene. The silence here is holy, expectant. It is the silence of a threshold. Down by the river, the water moves with a ceaseless, whispering voice over the stones. It is a sound so constant that the people who live nearby cease to hear it, unless they are listening for it. A young man and woman have stolen a moment away from watching eyes, meeting in the lee of the willows whose branches trail in the current. Their conversation is whispered, urgent. Their discoveries are of the heart and the flesh. They are mapping a territory more immediate and compelling than any charted by scholars. The touch of a hand, the meaning in a glance, the promise in a soft word. These are the coordinates of their new world. They speak of impossible futures, of running away, of finding a place where his apprenticeship and her family's objections do not matter. They know, on some level, that these are fantasies. The world of contracts and customs is a powerful, rigid thing. But for this moment, by the dark, murmuring water, they choose to believe otherwise. Their discovery is the potent, temporary sovereignty of desire. It is a knowledge that feels like a secret they alone possess, a flame they shelter between them against the vast, cold indifference of the social order. A cloud uncovers the moon, and its pale light silvers the river and their faces for an instant. They see each other clearly, and the sight is both a joy and a sorrow. Then the cloud passes, and they are shadows again. They part with a last, whispered vow, slipping back into the sleeping town from different directions, carrying the illicit warmth of the encounter back to their separate, appointed lives. The night deepens toward its midpoint. The air grows colder still. Frost begins to form in the sheltered corners, a delicate, crystalline lace on leaves and cobbles. In the forest beyond the fields, the world belongs to different rules. An owl sails silently between the trees, a gray ghost against the deeper black. A fox pauses on a path, one paw lifted, nostrils testing the air for scent. The cycles here are of hunger and satiation, of predation and survival, untouched by human philosophy or law. The discovery made here, by every creature, is the law of the immediate. Eat, avoid being eaten, find shelter, reproduce. It is a stark, clean logic. A badger roots in the leaf litter, the sound a steady, purposeful rustle. The wind moves through the high branches of the pines, a sound like a distant, endless exhalation. This is the older world, the one that existed before walls and words, and will exist long after. The human concerns, the taxes, the theological disputes, the medical theories, are as irrelevant here as the chatter of sparrows at dawn. The forest simply is vast, complex, and utterly indifferent. Back within the walls, in a small room above a chandler's shop, a woman cannot sleep. She lies beside her husband, listening to his steady snore. Her mind will not quiet. It moves in anxious circles around a debt coming due, around the worrying behavior of her eldest son, around a strange lump she felt in her breast that afternoon. Her discoveries are those of creeping dread. She has learned that trouble often announces itself not with a shout, but with a whisper, a slight change, a subtle pain, a vague unease. She has learned that the future is not a land of promise, but a landscape of potential threats. She tries to pray, but the words feel rote, empty. She tries to recall the wise woman's advice for calming the spirit, but she cannot remember the proper herb. So she simply lies there, her eyes open in the dark, watching the faint pattern of moonlight through the shutter slats slowly creep across the floor. Time stretches, becomes viscous. Each minute is a palpable weight. She is alone with her fears in a way she never is during the day, when action and necessity provide a distraction. This is the silent, private counterpart to the public life of the city. The internal vigil, the unspeakable worry, the slow erosion of peace from within. Eventually, exhausted not from labor but from the labor of thought, she slips into a thin, fitful sleep where her anxieties transmute into dreams of lost paths and searching for things she cannot name. In the castle, the Lord has retired. The great hall is empty now, the fire on the central hearth banked to a deep red glow. The tables are cleared, the rushes on the floor stirred by the passage of many feet. A single servant moves through the vast space, collecting a forgotten goblet. The silence here is immense, architectural. It is the silence of contained power at rest. Trophies of past hunts, antlers, a boar's head loom from the walls, indistinct shapes in the gloom. The banners of the house hang still. Everything here speaks of permanence, of lineage, of a name that intends to endure. But the servant, whose grandfather served this lord's grandfather, knows a different truth. He has seen fortunes change. He remembers a previous lord who was reckless and lost lands in a feud. He knows the current lord's son is sickly. His discovery is the fragility of dynasties. Stone can crumble. Names can be forgotten. The tapestry of power is woven with threads that can snap. He finishes his task and exits, closing the heavy oak door with a soft, final thud. The hall is left to its own devices, to the whispers of the draft in the high beams and the slow, patient sinking of the fire into ash. The world turns. In the farthest east, the blackness of the sky begins to soften, not with light, but with a lessening of density. The cycle is relentless. The discoveries of the day, personal, intellectual, brutal, tender, will soon be subsumed into the routine of a new dawn. The peasant will feel the same ache in his back. The potter will open his kiln to see what the fire has wrought. The scholar will take up his pen, his headache a familiar companion. The young lovers will resume their public roles, their secret a burning coal hidden in their chests. The mother will check her child's forehead for fever. The Lord will review new accounts. The pattern is not a story moving toward an ending. It is a wheel turning on the axle of necessity and human nature. Each life is a series of small, repeated discoveries. How to avoid pain, how to secure love, how to interpret a sign, how to endure loss, that aggregate into the experience of an age. The voice that speaks of these things does so from within the wheel, noting its revolutions, the grit that sometimes grinds in its gears, the wear on its spokes. There is no moral, no climax, no resolution. There is only the turning and the slow accumulation of days, each one layered over the last like sediment at the bottom of a deep, still river. And the river flows on, in darkness and in light, carrying all of it silently toward a sea too distant to be seen. And the river flows on, its surface a shifting mirror of the gray pre-dawn. In the mill house downstream, the great wheel is still, locked in place until the miller arrives to release the sluice gate. For now, it is a frozen sculpture of wood and iron, its buckets holding stagnant water and bits of debris. The quiet here is different from the town. A damp, earthy silence broken only by the plop of a frog entering the mill pond and the faint, ceaseless trickle of water finding its way through cracks in the gate. The miller's cat, a creature of efficient brutality, sits on a sack of grain, its eyes luminous slits in the gloom. It has discovered the perfect vantage point, where the heat of its body is retained by the dense flour dust coating the sack, and where any mouse that dares to cross the stone floor must pass within the range of a single lethal pounce. Its world is one of absolute immediacy, a perfect economy of motion and reward. It does not think of the grain, of the bread it will become, of the people who will eat it. It thinks of warmth and the next twitch in the shadows. In a narrow attic room under the eaves of a guild hall, an apprentice dreams. His body is sore from the day's labor, carrying, fetching, sweeping, holding tools for a master carpenter who rarely speaks except to criticize. In his dream, he is the master. He stands before a piece of seasoned oak, and with a clarity he never possesses while awake, he sees the chair within it. His hands move with confident grace. The tools are extensions of his will. The shavings curl away in perfect, fragrant spirals. There is no confusion, no fear of error. The discovery in the dream is one of seamless competence, of knowledge fully absorbed and effortlessly expressed. It is a beautiful, cruel illusion. He will wake to the familiar ache of incompetence, to the frustrating gap between the image in his mind and the clumsy reality his hands produce. But for these few hours, his spirit rehearses a future of mastery. His breathing, deep and regular, is the only sound in the tiny room. Outside, the first tentative chirp of a sparrow breaks the silence, a sound so faint it seems to come from another world entirely. Down in the kitchen of a well-to-do burgher's house, the fire must be kept alive through the night. A young kitchen maid, assigned the watch, dozes on a stool by the hearth. Her head nods forward, then jerks back up. Each time, she glances guiltily at the banked coals, glowing like a cluster of tiny, orange planets in the ash. Her discovery is the profound, physical tyranny of fatigue. Sleep is not a gentle invitation. It is a weight that pulls at her eyelids, a fog that thickens her thoughts. The warmth of the fire is a seductive enemy, coaxing her into oblivion. She fights it with the dull, stubborn resilience of the perpetually tired. Her world is measured in tasks completed. The pot scoured, the floor swept, the fire maintained. There is no room in it for abstract thought, only for the next chore in an endless sequence. A log shifts in the hearth with a soft crunch, sending up a shower of sparks. She starts, fully awake for a moment, and pushes the log back into place with an iron poker. The metal feels cool in her hand, a brief shock against the pervasive warmth. She settles back on the stool, pulling her thin shawl tighter. The darkness outside the kitchen's small window is absolute, a wall of black that promises more night than she can bear to measure. On the city walls, a sentry stamps his feet against the cold. His breath plumes before him, a ghostly exhalation snatched away by a slight breeze. He stares out into the nothingness beyond the ditch and the cleared fields. His discovery is the monotony of vigilance. Nothing ever happens. The threat of attack, of siege, of some dramatic event is a story told to justify the long, empty hours. What he contends with is the cold, the boredom, and the creeping suspicion that his presence here is a formality, a ritual performed long after its original meaning has faded. He knows every irregularity in the stone parapet before him. He has counted the stars in a particular patch of sky 100 times. He has invented games to pass the time, singing songs in his head, remembering every meal he has ever eaten, reconstructing conversations from years past. His true enemy is not an invading army, but the slow, insidious erosion of his own attention. He shifts his weight, the leather of his gambeson creaking. Somewhere in the distance, a fox screams. a high, piercing sound that is almost human. It raises the hair on his neck for a second, a primal response to a wildness that the wall was built to exclude. Then the silence rushes back in, thicker than before. In the alchemist's study, the night is for work. The furnaces are banked, but a small, constant heat emanates from them, keeping the chill of the stone room at bay. The alchemist is not a dramatic figure muttering incantations over a bubbling flask. He is a meticulous, weary man updating his ledger by candlelight. He records weights, temperatures, observations. Mercurial sublimate combined with vitriol, heated for 3 hours. Result: a reddish powder. Fumes caused watering of the eyes and a tightness in the chest. Powder set aside for testing on a fragment of lead. His discovery is the incremental nature of failure. True transformation, the great work, eludes him. But he has catalogued 1,000 smaller interactions, a vast, useless encyclopedia of things that do not turn lead into gold. Yet he persists. The lure is not just gold, but the promise of a fundamental truth, a key to the secret language of matter itself. He has learned that patience is the primary reagent, that expectation is the enemy of clear observation. He closes the ledger, his fingers leaving faint smudges on the parchment. The air in the room tastes metallic, with an undertone of sulfur and something vaguely sweet and rotten. He knows this air is likely harming him. The tremors in his left hand have grown more noticeable. But he has also discovered a kind of addiction, not to the substances, but to the process of inquiry, to the lonely, sacred pursuit of a hidden order. He blows out the candle and sits in the dark, surrounded by the silent, enigmatic presence of his jars and retorts, each one holding a question frozen in glass. The sky, at last, begins its imperceptible shift. The black becomes a deep, bruised purple. Then, along the eastern horizon, a thin line of palest green appears, like tarnished silver. It holds no warmth, only the suggestion of light to come. In the dovecot, the birds begin their soft, liquid cooing, a sound of comfort and routine that has greeted 10,000 such dawns. In the stable, a horse stamps and snorts, sensing the change. The rhythms of the natural world, suppressed but never erased by human industry, begin to reassert themselves. In the narrow bed of the sleepless woman, the pattern of moonlight has vanished from the floor. The darkness is now uniform, a final, deep pool before it is drained away. She has passed from anxious thought into a state of numb resignation. The sharp edges of her fears have been worn smooth by fatigue. She finds she can observe them now with a detached curiosity, as if they belong to someone else. This, too, is a discovery. The mind's capacity to retreat from its own suffering, to build a small inner chamber of apathy for protection. She hears her husband stir beside her, muttering in his sleep. The sound is familiar, almost comforting in its normality. The lump in her breast, the debt, her son's future, they are still there, but they have lost their urgent, clawing quality. They have become facts of her landscape, like a tree or a stone in a field. She will have to navigate around them. She closes her eyes, not to sleep, but to rest in this temporary hollow peace. The sentry on the wall sees the green line on the horizon. A profound, almost spiritual relief washes through him. The watch is nearly over. The most dangerous time, the time when the mind plays its cruelest tricks, has passed. He allows himself to think of the thick porridge waiting in the guardhouse, of the scratchy wool blanket on his pallet. His vigil has been successful in the only way that matters. Nothing happened. He has maintained the illusion of security through another night. He leans his elbows on the cold stone, his body finally allowing itself to feel the full weight of its tiredness. The world before him is no longer a void, but a scene slowly assembling itself. The dark mounds of field boundaries, the faint silver thread of a stream, the stark silhouette of a lone, leafless tree. It is a world returning to visibility, and with it, his own sense of being a part of something solid, something daylit and real. The kitchen maid, losing her battle, has slumped forward, her head resting on her knees. She sleeps deeply, instantly, a sleep of utter exhaustion. The fire, untended, sinks a little lower, its glow dimming. But it holds. It will last until the head cook arrives in an hour, clapping her hands and bringing the kitchen to furious, shouting life. For now, the girl dreams of nothing at all. Her mind is a blank, weary slate. The scholar, in his bed, drifts in a shallow, restless sea. Fragments of the text he translated swim behind his eyelids. Latin phrases twisting into nonsensical shapes, diagrams of the zodiac melting into botanical illustrations. His discovery in this hypnagogic state is the fragility of ordered knowledge. It dissolves at the edges, bleeds into chaos, reforms as strange and personal symbolism. A sentence about Saturn's influence becomes a vision of his stern, disapproving father. The ache in his head becomes a physical manifestation of the weight of the words themselves. He turns over, the straw mattress rustling like dry leaves. The tension does not leave his body, even in repose. It is held in the set of his jaw, the tightness across his shoulders, a permanent inscription of intellectual labor on the flesh. The Lord, in his curtained bed, sleeps the secure, heavy sleep of power. His dreams are of management and possession. Fields of ripe wheat stretching to the horizon, all his. A new wing being added to the castle without cost or effort. His son, robust and strong, leading men into a battle that is already won. His discoveries in sleep are of amplifications, of desires effortlessly fulfilled. There is no conflict, only expansion. A faint smile touches his lips. In the corridor outside, a servant passes silently, carrying a chamber pot to be emptied. The sound of his soft footfalls on the rushes does not penetrate the Lord's dream world of abundance and control. And as the green band of light widens, bleeding upward into indigo and then a cool, clear blue, the city itself seems to take a long, slow breath. The darkness relinquishes its hold, not all at once, but grain by grain. Shapes solidify, colors timidly return. The brown of a thatched roof, the gray of stone, the dark green of ivy on a wall. Smoke begins to rise again from a few early chimneys, the threads straight and vertical in the windless dawn. A door opens somewhere with a sharp crack, the sound startlingly loud in the stillness. A voice calls out, a single word lost in the vastness of the waking world. The cycle is not beginning anew, for it never truly ended. It is simply becoming visible again, like a wheel that has turned through the hidden arc of the night and now presents a familiar face to the light. The discoveries of the darkness, the loneliness, the fear, the cold, the small personal epiphanies of endurance are not erased. They are folded into the fabric of the coming day, becoming part of the unspoken history that every person carries within them. A subtle weight that influences the step, the glance, the tone of voice. The potter will soon rise and walk to his cold kiln, his heart a tight knot of hope and dread. The mother will check her child's forehead, her fingers knowing and gentle. The young lovers will see each other across the market square, and their eyes will hold a secret that makes the mundane transactions around them feel like a poorly acted play. The scholar will feel the familiar pressure behind his eyes as he reaches for his pen. The sentry will eat his porridge and fall onto his pallet, his body grateful for the horizontal plane. The alchemist will inhale the metallic air of his study and begin again. The Lord will read the dispatches from his steward. The miller will release the sluice gate, and the great wheel will groan into motion, its buckets dipping into the river, lifting water and spilling it back, turning endlessly on its axis, driving the stones that grind the grain that makes the bread that fuels the bodies that dream and fear and discover and endure. The light grows stronger, washing over the world in a calm, indifferent tide. It reveals everything and explains nothing. It illuminates the cobbled street, the patch of weeds growing between stones, the discarded fragment of a broken pot, the track of a cart wheel in the damp earth. It shows the face of the city as it is. Not a storybook illustration, but a lived-in, worn-down, magnificent accumulation of effort and accident. The voices multiply, layering into the familiar daytime symphony. A hammer rings, a child laughs, a merchant argues, a bell tolls the hour. The night's discoveries of fragility, of desire, of monotony, of the slow poison of lead or anxiety, are not resolved. They are simply absorbed into the ongoing noise of life, becoming part of the hum that is the sound of 1,000 simultaneous ordinary existences, each moving at its own pace through the hours, under the same slowly warming sun, beside the same ceaselessly flowing river. The river's flow is a patient sculptor of the landscape, wearing away stone grain by grain over centuries unseen by any living eye. It carries within its current the dissolved history of the hills, flecks of mountain granite, particles of forest loam, the faint, distant memory of rain. It passes the mill wheel, now turning with a rhythmic, groaning cadence, and continues on, indifferent to the machinery it powers. It slides beneath the bridge where lovers whispered, its surface now glittering under the direct morning sun, erasing all trace of their clandestine meeting. Further downstream, it widens, flowing past the tannery whose bitter effluents stain its banks a sickly yellow-brown for a stretch, before the water's own immense volume slowly dilutes and carries the poison away toward the distant, unseen sea. The river makes no distinction. It accepts the clean and the foul, the sacred offering and the night soil, the leaf from the Lord's oak and the shard of the peasant's cup, carrying them all with the same implacable, silent momentum. Its discovery, if it could make one, would be that everything is temporary, that all things are granted passage for only a brief moment before being surrendered to the larger, salt darkness. In the tannery yard, the day's work has achieved its grim rhythm. Men stand waist-deep in pits of liquored oak bark and lime, working hides with poles, their arms and faces splattered with the foul mixture. The smell is a physical presence, a thick, choking blanket that hangs over the entire district. Flies drone in dense clouds. The tanner, a man whose own skin seems permanently stained a deep, weathered brown, moves between the pits, assessing the progress of the cure. His discovery is one of graduated repulsion. A new apprentice will retch for the first week. After a month, the smell becomes a constant, bitter companion. After a year, it fades into the background of perception, noticed only by its absence. He has learned to navigate a world that others find uninhabitable. He has also learned the precise economics of decay and preservation. A hide treated too briefly will rot. Treated too long, it will become brittle. His knowledge is in his nostrils and his fingertips, a sensory understanding of transformation from putrid flesh to durable leather. He shouts an instruction to a worker, his voice hoarse from years of breathing the caustic air. The worker nods, his face a mask of resigned endurance. There is no conversation here, only the necessary exchange of information over the roar of the flies and the splash of the pits. Their world is one of elemental processes, of wresting utility from corruption through a regimen of calculated suffering. First the animals, now their own. In a sunlit square away from the river, a group of children have been momentarily released from chores. Their game is simple, chasing a makeshift ball of rags. Their laughter is sharp and clear, a counterpoint to the drone of the tannery. Their discoveries are of the body in motion, the thrill of speed, the shock of a fall, the satisfying thump of a kick that sends the rag ball soaring. A little girl sits on a step, watching, a cloth doll clutched in her arms. She is discovering the pleasure of observation, of constructing narratives from the chaos of the game. That boy is the hero. This one is the foolish giant. Her doll is a queen, presiding over the spectacle. Her world is small, bounded by the square, her home, and the few familiar faces of her family. The larger discoveries of the age, of plague, of lead, of theological dispute, are as distant to her as the patterns of the stars. Her reality is the texture of the wooden step beneath her, the warmth of the sun on her neck, the secure weight of the doll in her lap, and the unfolding drama of the game before her. A boy stumbles and scrapes his knee. He howls more from surprise than pain. The game pauses. For a moment, the sharp reality of a broken boundary, the skin, intrudes upon the world of imagination. Then an older sister hustles over, clucking her tongue, spits on her apron and wipes the dirt from the wound. The magic of the game reasserts itself. The boy, his crisis attended to, limps heroically back into the fray. The discovery here is fleeting but profound. That small pains can be soothed, that play can resume, that the world, for this hour, is forgiving. In the scriptorium of the monastery, the morning light slants through high, narrow windows, illuminating dancing motes of dust and parchment. A dozen monks bend over their desks, the silence broken only by the scratch of quills, the gentle rustle of a page being turned, and the occasional soft sigh. Their discoveries are microscopic, occurring letter by letter. The shape of a perfect M, the exact consistency of ink that flows without blotting. The mental discipline required to copy a lengthy passage without the mind wandering into daydream or prayer. One monk is illuminating a capital letter, applying minute strokes of gold leaf with a brush made from a single squirrel hair. His entire universe has contracted to the space of a walnut shell. His breathing is shallow, controlled. A tremor, a moment of inattention, would ruin hours of work. He has discovered a state of hyperfocus grace, where time seems to suspend itself and the self dissolves into the act of creation. He is not decorating a page. He is allowing beauty to manifest through his utterly disciplined hand. The saint depicted in the letter's loop looks out with serene, almond-shaped eyes, forever captured in this moment of meticulous devotion. The monk feels no pride, only a humble sense of being a conduit. The discovery is that perfection, though unattainable in life, can be approximated in artifact, if one is willing to pay the price of immense, silent concentration. At the edge of the forest, a charcoal burner tends his mylar, a carefully stacked, smoldering mound of wood covered with turf and earth. Thin, acrid smoke seeps from 100 tiny vents in the mound, weaving a blue-gray veil through the surrounding trees. The man's face is blackened with soot, his eyes red-rimmed from the smoke. He moves slowly, checking the soil covering, listening to the subtle sounds from within the mound. His discovery is the alchemy of airlessness. Too much oxygen, and the wood will flame to worthless ash. Too little, and the fire will die, leaving half-charred logs. The correct, agonizingly slow burn transforms solid oak into lightweight, porous charcoal. It is a week-long vigil of constant, subtle adjustment. He lives in a rough hut nearby, his world reduced to the circle of forest around his mylar. He knows the signs of the weather in the way the smoke behaves. He knows the different qualities of heat from beech versus oak. His knowledge is intimate, tactile, born of soot and sweat and patience. He speaks to no one for days at a time. His companions are the sounds of the forest and the silent, breathing mound. He has discovered the deep solitude that accompanies a craft which demands uninterrupted attention to a slow, invisible transformation. A rabbit breaks from the undergrowth, pauses to look at him with no fear. He is as much a part of the landscape as a tree, and then hops away. The charcoal burner nods, as if to a neighbor, and returns to his watching. In the castle's chapel, a lady kneels on the cold stone floor. The morning mass is long over. She is alone. Sunlight filters through a stained glass window, casting pools of ruby and sapphire light on the flags. She is not praying for anything in particular. She is practicing the discipline of presence. Her discoveries are of the interior landscape. She has learned that prayer can be a form of architecture, building a quiet space within the self where the clamor of court life, the gossip, the politics, the constant performance of status cannot reach. She focuses on her breathing, on the faint scent of beeswax and incense that lingers in the still air. She observes the thoughts that flit through her mind. A concern for her daughter's marriage prospects, a remembered slight from another lady, a petty jealousy, and lets them pass without engagement, like leaves floating down a stream. This mental discipline is her secret sanctuary. It is a discovery of agency in a life largely dictated by the wills of men. Her father, her husband, her king. Here, in the colored light, she governs her own attention. It is a small, profound power. The silence of the chapel is not empty. It is full, a substance she can lean into. She hears the distant cry of a hawk from the mews, a sound that seems to come from another world entirely. She makes the sign of the cross, a habitual, comforting gesture, and rises, her skirts whispering against the stone. The peace she has cultivated remains within her as she steps back into the corridor, ready to reassume the mask of her public role. Down by the fishmonger's stall on the river quay, business is conducted with a brisk, shouting energy. The catch, silver and opalescent, is laid out on beds of wet rushes. The stench of scales and brine is sharp, clean compared to the tannery's miasma. Gulls wheel and scream overhead, diving for scraps. The fishmonger, a woman with forearms like knotted rope and a voice that can cut through the din, haggles with a cook from a wealthy household. Their transaction is a rapid-fire dance of offer and counteroffer, insult and flattery, concluding with a price and the swift transfer of 3 fat trout into the cook's basket. The fishmonger's discovery is the fluid calculus of perishability. The value of her wares diminishes with every hour the sun climbs higher. She must read the crowd, judge the supply, sense the moment to drop her price to ensure nothing is left to rot at day's end. Her knowledge is in her gut, a visceral market sense. She knows which households pay promptly, which cooks will try to steal a mussel when her back is turned, which days the monks will buy in bulk for fast days. She wipes her hands on her leather apron, leaving shining streaks. A young boy, her apprentice, scurries to swab down the slab with river water, scattering the flies. The world here is wet, loud, and immediate. There is no time for reflection, only for action based on a deep, unspoken understanding of hunger, currency, and the relentless march of decay. In a small, tidy cottage at the end of a lane, an old man is dying. It is the charcoal burner's father. He has taken to his bed, and the wise woman has shaken her head, saying it is his time. He is not in pain. He simply grows weaker, like a lamp whose oil is nearly spent. His daughter sits with him, dipping a cloth in water to moisten his lips. His discoveries now are of the borders of consciousness. He drifts in and out of memory. One moment he is a boy again, swimming in the river on a hot day. The next, he is seeing the worried face of his daughter, blurred as if through deep water. He tries to speak, to tell her about the swim, but his tongue is heavy, and the words will not form. He discovers that the past can become more vivid than the present, that the barrier between memory and reality grows thin and permeable. He feels no fear, only a growing curiosity about this process of unbecoming. His body, which has hauled wood, built huts, weathered storms, and loved a wife, is now a distant country he is quietly leaving. His breath is a soft, irregular rustle in the quiet room. The daughter holds his hand, her own hands rough from work. She is discovering the shape of impending loss, the way it hollows out a space in the world before the event itself occurs. She watches the slow, shallow rise and fall of his chest, measuring the distance between each breath, knowing each one could be the last. The sunlight moves across the floor, marking the passage of a time that no longer holds meaning for the old man in the bed. The only sound is the gentle crackle of the fire and the old man's fragile, papery breathing. The papery breathing continues, a frail thread tethering the old man to the room, to the fire's crackle, to the rough warmth of his daughter's hand. In the spaces between breaths, the silence expands, becoming a presence itself. The daughter does not count them anymore. She has moved beyond measurement into a state of pure attendance. Her mind is still, emptied of the usual inventory of chores and worries. It is filled instead with the texture of this moment, the dry, cool parchment of her father's skin, the way the afternoon light dusts the motes above the hearth, the profound, simple fact of being here. She discovers that grief, in its anticipatory stage, can be a form of perfect focus. The world beyond the cottage door, the market shouts, the turning mill wheel, the Lord's decrees, has ceased to exist. There is only this vigil, this slow, shared journey to a threshold. She realizes she is not waiting for him to die. She is accompanying him as far as she can go. This is a discovery of love stripped of all utility, reduced to its essence. Witness. A fly buzzes against the horn window, a blunt, mundane sound. The old man's eyelids flutter. He is somewhere else now, not in the river of his youth, but in a forest of deep green twilight. He is walking, but his legs feel no strain. The air is cool and smells of damp moss and decaying leaves, a scent he knows intimately from a lifetime of work. He sees a light ahead, diffused and golden, filtering through the trees. He feels a pull toward it, not urgent, but gentle and inevitable. There is no fear in this discovery, only a quiet recognition. The path is familiar, though he has never walked it before. He does not look back. The light grows brighter, dissolving the details of the trees, until everything is a soft, welcoming radiance. His breathing in the cottage room slows. There is a long pause, then a final, slight exhalation, more a sigh of release than a breath. The thread snaps. The silence in the room changes quality, becoming absolute, settled. The daughter feels it in the sudden stillness of the hand she holds. She does not weep immediately. She sits for a long time, just holding the hand, watching the peaceful emptiness of his face. Her discovery now is the physical fact of absence. The vessel is here, but the essence, the hymn, is gone. It is a fact as solid and strange as a mountain suddenly appearing in a flat field. She leans forward and closes his eyes with her fingertips, a gesture of tender completion. The vigil is over. The duties of the living now resume. She stands, her body stiff, and goes to the door to tell the neighbor. The world outside rushes back in, harsh and bright and indifferent. In the castle's counting room, the afternoon sun slants across a column of figures. The steward's pen hovers. He has discovered an anomaly. The yield from the western barley fields is significantly lower than projected. He traces back through the records. The planting was timely, the summer was not overly dry. He sends for the bailiff of that village. While he waits, he stares at the numbers, as if they might rearrange themselves into a more pleasing configuration. His discovery is the fragility of systems. A single variable, a blight, a theft, a lazy reeve, can unravel the careful projections that govern the estate's economy. The numbers are not abstractions. They represent actual grain, missing from the storehouses, which represents less bread, which represents discontent or hunger, or a shortfall in the tithe to the Lord's overlord. It is a cascade of consequences contained within a tiny notation on parchment. The bailiff arrives, hat in hand, smelling of horse and earth. He explains, haltingly, that a sickness passed through the village in late summer. Several key laborers were abed for weeks during the critical harvest period. Much of the crop was left too long in the field. Some spoiled, some was taken by birds. The steward listens, his face impassive. The explanation is plausible. It is also unverifiable. Was it truly sickness, or was grain secretly diverted? He has discovered that trust is a ledger with its own debits and credits, and that suspicion is a necessary tool of management. He notes the reason in the margin of the account, a permanent mark against that village's record. He dismisses the bailiff with a warning to ensure better health next season. The door closes. The steward returns to his figures, adjusting the totals downward. The system absorbs the shock, recalibrates. The discovery of the shortfall becomes just another data point, a lesson in the perennial struggle between human frailty and agricultural expectation. In the forest, the charcoal burner's miler has entered its most critical phase. The smoke has turned from thick and white to a thin, barely visible blue ghost. He knows this sign. The burn is reaching its heart. For the next day, he must not sleep. He paces around the mound, his senses hyper-alert to the smell, the sound, the feel of the heat radiating from the earthen cover. He is a midwife to a birth of carbon. His discovery is the intimacy of a process that takes days to complete. He knows this particular mound as an individual entity. He stacked it, he knows its density, the mix of woods within it. He has listened to it breathe for a week. His relationship with it is one of intense, silent collaboration. If he fails now, all the previous labor is lost. The night will be long. He builds a small fire for himself a safe distance away, not for warmth. The miler provides that, but for the companionship of its light. He eats a piece of hard cheese and some drier bread. The forest sounds deepen as the light fades. The hoot of an owl, the rustle of something small in the bracken. He is not afraid. He belongs here as much as the fox or the badger. His discovery, repeated with every burn, is that civilization. The town, its laws, its noise, is a thin veneer. Beneath it lies this older, slower world of elemental transformation, governed by the laws of wood and fire and air, where success is measured not in coin, but in the quality of the black, porous bricks he will unearth in another day's time. At the farrier's forge near the city gate, the last customer of the day is being seen. A carter's draft horse, a massive, patient creature, has thrown a shoe. The farrier, a man whose leather apron is scarred with old burns, lifts the beast's hoof, cradles it between his knees, and works with calm, sure movements. The old, bent nail is pried out. The hot shoe, fresh from the coals, is pressed against the hoof, sending up a plume of acrid smoke and the distinctive scent of searing horn. The horse shivers but stands still, accustomed to the ritual. The farrier's discovery is the language of animals. He reads the tension in a muscle, the flick of an ear, the set of a jaw. He knows this horse is tired, not lame. He knows the carter is anxious to be on his way before full dark. His work is a negotiation between metal, fire, animal physiology, and human need. He hammers the new nails, clips and bends the ends, files the hoof smooth. The actions are rhythmic, practiced, a kind of kinetic poetry. When he releases the hoof, the horse stamps it experimentally on the packed earth, then leans its great head against the farrier's shoulder in a gesture of thanks. The farrier smiles, a brief crack in his soot-stained face, and rubs the velvety muzzle. He takes the carter's coins without looking at them, his mind already on cleaning his tools and banking his fire. His discovery, day after day, is the satisfaction of a concrete problem solved, a tangible need met. There is a shoe. It was lost. Now it is replaced. The horse can pull. The cart can roll. The world, in this small, vital way, is set right again. In the quiet of the monastery library, as the sun throws long, rectangular shadows across the flagged floor, the scholar from the tower room is now a reader. He has moved from creation to consumption, studying a treatise on optics translated from the Arabic. He follows the arguments about light, vision, and the nature of reflection. It contradicts something he read last month in a Greek text. His discovery is the friction between knowledge systems. He is not dismayed, he is intrigued. The conflict is a space for new thought. He takes notes, not copying, but synthesizing, drawing lines of connection, questioning both authorities. For a moment, he forgets his headache, the cold of the room, the distant sounds of the Compline bell. He is in a silent, luminous conversation across time and space with minds he will never meet. This is the pure, abstract joy of the intellect, the discovery that truth is not a single, monolithic stone, but a mosaic being assembled from countless fragments, some of which do not yet fit. He traces a diagram with his finger on the table, imagining the paths of light rays. The world of flesh and stone recedes. He exists in a realm of geometry and hypothesis. It is a form of asceticism as rigorous as any fast, and as rewarding to him as any prayer. In the narrow house where the woman discovered the lump, evening has fallen. The family is gathered for a meager supper of pottage and bread. She moves carefully, serving her husband and children, her face a careful mask of normalcy. She has not spoken of the lump. The discovery is hers alone, a secret prisoner held within the walls of her body. She watches her children eat, their faces illuminated by the single tallow candle. Their chatter is about the day, a broken toy, a funny sight in the street, a friend's promise. Their world is still intact. Hers has developed a hairline fracture. Every laugh from them is both a blessing and a painful reminder of a future she may not share. She discovers the strange duality of carrying a secret doom. The ordinary becomes piercingly beautiful. The steam rising from the bowl, the curve of her daughter's cheek, the comfortable bulk of her husband across the table. Yet it is all viewed through a lens of potential loss, giving it a heartbreaking clarity. She eats little. Her husband asks if she is well. She smiles and says she is tired, which is true. It is not the whole truth. The whole truth sits beneath her clothes, a small, hard knot of fear. She will go to the wise woman tomorrow, she decides. The discovery must be shared, must be named. But for tonight, it remains hers, a silent, cold companion at the family table. On the walls, a new shift of centuries has taken over. They are fresher, more alert, their conversations slightly louder in the crisp evening air. They speak of mundane things, but their eyes constantly scan the darkening fields. One of them points out a flickering light far in the distance, a shepherd's fire, perhaps, or a charcoal burner's mound. They debate it idly, a way to pass the time. Their discovery is the psychology of the watch. The mind, to stay alert, needs small puzzles, minor debates, stories told in segments. They invent personalities for the distant light. They make wagers on when it will go out. They are building a narrative to stave off the numbing emptiness of the night ahead. The stars begin to appear. First one, then another, then a sudden, dizzying multitude. A sentry who knows a little of the scholar's trade names a few constellations, the plough, the hunter. The others listen, their faces upturned. For a moment, their world expands from the stone parapet to the incomprehensible vault of the heavens. The discovery is one of scale. Their small vigil, their personal cold and boredom, is set against a backdrop of ancient, icy lights. It is a humbling and oddly comforting thought. Their watch is insignificant. Therefore, its discomfort is also insignificant. They fall silent, each alone with the stars, feeling both tiny and connected to something vast. In the alchemist's study, the night's work has begun in earnest. A small crucible is heating over a specially crafted furnace. Inside is a mixture he has prepared after months of calculation. This is not a random experiment. It is a deliberate test of a new theory regarding the purification of metals. His hands are steady as he adjusts the bellows. The tremors are gone for now, banished by concentration. His discovery in this moment is the purity of intention. All doubt, all thought of failure, all awareness of his ailing body, is burned away in the focus of the procedure. He is a nerve ending for the process, his senses attuned to the color of the flame, the smell of the vapors, the subtle sounds from the crucible. He is not trying to make gold. He is trying to understand a single, specific interaction. The outcome is secondary to the integrity of the method. He records each step in his mind, to be written down later. The furnace glow paints his face in shifting oranges and reds, making him look like an icon of some obscure saint of knowledge. The room is hot, close, thick with anticipation and strange odors. Time contracts. There is only the now, the heat, the watched pot. He does not pray. He observes. This is his religion. And in the cottage of the dead charcoal burner, the daughter has performed the necessary tasks. The neighbor women have washed the body. It now lies in a clean shroud on the trestle table, candles at head and foot. The priest has come and gone, his rites performed. The daughter sits alone again, the formalities over. The discovery now is the shape of the space left behind. The room feels different. It is not just that her father is gone. It is that his absence has a texture, a weight. It presses on the corners of the room, fills the chair by the fire, silences a certain kind of quiet that was once companionable. She feels no overwhelming grief, only a deep, settled weariness and this new, strange geography of loss. She looks at her own hands in her lap. They are his hands, she realizes, the same square palms, the same pattern of veins. The discovery is one of continuity. He is gone, but she remains, carrying his likeness in her bones, his habits in her movements. She is the next marker in a line that stretches back into the forest gloom and forward into a future she cannot see. The candle flames waver in a draft. Outside, the wind has picked up, murmuring in the thatch. It is a sound he would have noted, predicting rain by morning. She listens, and for the first time she tries to hear the weather as he would have heard it. It is a way of keeping him near. The night deepens around her, holding both the emptiness and this new, fragile connection. The wind does bring rain, a soft, persistent pattering that begins just before midnight. It whispers against the thatch of 1,000 roofs, drums lightly on shuttered windows, and fills the gutters with a gentle, rushing murmur. In the charcoal burner's forest, it hisses through the canopy, a sound like a vast, collective sigh. The burner man feels the first drops on his face as he circles his miler. He pulls his hood up, not in annoyance, but with a sense of collaboration. The rain is good. It will help seal the earthen cover, ensuring an even, airless burn. It will also keep random sparks in check. He discovers, not for the first time, that his work is a dialogue with the elements, not a battle against them. The fire within the mound is now a contained, subterranean sun, unaffected by the weather on the surface. The rain cools his face, washes the soot and sweat into the corners of his eyes. He tastes its clean, metallic tang. He is a creature of two worlds: the primeval wet dark of the forest night, and the secret, fierce heart of heat and transformation he guards. He finds a dryish spot under the lip of his hut, and from there he continues his watch, his eyes reflecting the faint, hellish glow seeping from the base of the mound. In the town, the rain changes the soundscape. The usual night noises are softened, blanketed. The watchman's footsteps are muffled. The occasional cry from a tavern is absorbed by the wet air. The rain finds the weak spots. A drip begins in the corner of the scholar's room. A steady plink into a copper bowl he has placed there for that purpose. The rhythm is irregular, maddening. He lies awake, listening to it punctuate the silence, each drop a tiny hammer blow on his concentration. His discovery is the tyranny of the insignificant. A great mind can be unraveled by a persistent drip, just as a kingdom can be toppled by a single, poorly forged nail in a horseshoe. He tries to incorporate it into his thoughts, to make it the metronome for a mental exercise, but it defeats him. It is merely water, finding the path of least resistance through old, ill-maintained stone. He pulls his thin blanket over his head, but the sound is inside his skull now. His headache, a low companion all evening, sharpens its focus. The grand abstractions of optics and celestial mechanics are powerless against the concrete reality of a leaking roof and the damp slowly spreading across the floor rushes. In the burgher's house, the kitchen maid, her night watch over, sleeps in a narrow alcove off the kitchen. The rain on the slate roof just above her head is a comforting, enclosing sound. It speaks of a world washed clean, of a temporary reprieve from dust and noise. For her, it is not an irritant but a lullaby. She dreams of a field she knew as a child, a vast, open space where she once lay and watched clouds. In the dream, it begins to rain, a warm, gentle rain that soaks her clothes and makes the grass glisten. She is not cold. She is simply part of the weather. Her discovery in sleep is a memory of belonging to something larger than the kitchen's relentless cycle of fire and grease. She smiles in her sleep, a rare, unguarded expression. Down in the kitchen proper, the banked fire hisses softly as a stray drip finds its way down the chimney. The sentries on the wall are miserable. The rain finds every gap in their cloaks and hoods. It runs in cold rivulets down their necks and under their armor. Their conversation dies. There is nothing to say. The shared misery is profound but wordless. The world they are supposed to be watching has contracted to the few feet of wet stone in the dim halo of their lanterns. Everything beyond is a wall of black, streaked with silver. Their discovery is the sheer physicality of discomfort. Philosophy, loyalty, even fear are stripped away. There is only the cold, the wet, the ache in the feet from standing still, and the longing for the dry, however scratchy, blanket on the pallet in the guardhouse. They become statues of endurance, their minds reduced to a single, monotonous thought. The shift will end. Time stretches like a sodden rag. One of them sneezes explosively. The sound is startling in the muffled night. The other man grunts in sympathy. It is the only exchange for an hour. In the cottage where the old man died, his daughter finally sleeps, slumped in the chair by the hearth. The rain on the thatch is a sound she has heard all her life. It does not wake her. It weaves into her dreams, which are formless and shifting, full of unspoken words and half-remembered faces. The candle has guttered out. The body on the table is a pale, quiet shape in the dark. The rain outside performs a kind of endless, gentle ablution for the world, for the living and the dead alike. It washes the dust from the streets, fills the wells, swells the river, and soaks into the earth where the old man will soon lie. It is a process without sentiment, a cycle of return. The daughter's sleep is deep, a collapse after the long tension of the vigil. She does not dream of her father. She dreams of silence, and of a path through a familiar wood that seems to go on forever. At the farrier's forge, the fire is banked, the tools hung in neat rows. The farrier himself is home, in a small room above a cooper's workshop. He lies beside his wife, listening to the rain on the roof. He is warm, dry, and tired in a good way. His discovery, as he drifts toward sleep, is the deep satisfaction of physical fatigue earned by skilled labor. His muscles ache, but it is a clean ache, a record of useful action. The image of the carter's horse, shod and steady, lingers in his mind. He imagines it pulling its load down a rain-slicked road tomorrow, the new iron shoes striking sparks from the stones. It is a good thought. His wife murmurs in her sleep and turns toward him. He puts an arm around her, the calloused palm resting gently on her shoulder. The rain sounds like peace. It is the sound of no one needing a horse shod, of the world being told to wait. His breathing slows, sinking with the patter above. The complexities of the town, the rumors of sickness, the Lord's taxes, all recede into a blur. Here, in the dry dark, there is only warmth, rest, and the simple animal comfort of proximity. In the alchemist's study, the experiment has reached its conclusion. The crucible has cooled. With tongs, he lifts it and tips the contents onto a smooth stone slab. What emerges is not gold, nor a mystical powder, but a lump of dull, slag-like material, streaked with unfamiliar colors. He prods it with a glass rod. It is brittle, useless. He feels no disappointment, only a sharp, clinical curiosity. He records the result in his ledger with the same meticulous hand he would have used for a success. Combination failed to cohere, produced a vitreous, fractured mass. Odor of sulfur and something akin to burnt almonds upon fracture. His discovery is the value of the negative result. Each failure is a signpost indicating a path not to take. The map of possible transformations is vast. Each dead end ruled out brings him, theoretically, closer to the true path. He cleans his tools methodically. The tremors have returned to his hands, a slight but persistent quiver. He ignores them. The rain against his high, barred window is a distraction he has trained himself not to hear. His world is the world of the ledger, the furnace, and the silent, enigmatic behavior of substances. The night outside, with its rain and its sleeping people, is less real to him than the intricate lattice of theory he is building in his mind, one failed experiment at a time. In the castle, the Lord is awakened not by the rain, but by his young son, who has had a nightmare. The boy, slight and feverishly warm, has crept into the room and stands shivering by the bed. The Lord does not summon a nurse. He lifts the child into the great bed, tucking him between himself and his sleeping wife. The boy's small body is tense with fright. The Lord tells him a story, not of knights and dragons, but of the castle itself, of how its stones were cut from the quarry, how the oak for its beams was chosen from the forest, how the masons who laid the foundations were the finest in the land. He speaks of its strength, its safety. It is a story of permanence. The boy listens, his breathing gradually slowing. The Lord discovers, in the middle of the night, a version of himself that exists outside of accounts and strategy. It is a self defined by protection, by a primal, wordless urge to shelter this small, vulnerable life from all the nightmares, both dreamed and real. He feels the child relax into sleep. The rain on the tower roof is a distant drum, underscoring the safety of the walls. He stays awake long after the boy is asleep, one hand on the small, rising and falling back, staring into the canopy of the bed. The discovery is bittersweet. This fierce love is another form of vulnerability. To protect something is to have something to lose. The castle's strength is meaningless measured against the fragility of the child in his arms. Dawn approaches not with color, but with a gradual lightening from black to gray. The rain continues, steady and patient. In the forest, the charcoal burner can now see the steam rising from his mylar, a thick, white plume that mingles with the rain and mist. It is a sign the burn is complete. The fire within is dying, starving of fuel. His long vigil is over. He will let it cool for a day before unearthing the prize. He stands, his joints stiff, his body humming with fatigue and triumph. He looks at the smoldering mound with something akin to affection. The discovery is one of completion, of a cycle perfectly closed. He has wrested order from chaos, a useful thing from raw nature, through sheer, sustained attention. He gathers his few utensils and ducks into his hut. He will sleep now, deeply and without dreams, to the sound of rain on the turf roof, the smell of wet earth and wood smoke cradling him. He is at peace with his place in the order of things. He is a node in an ancient process, as natural as the fox or the rain itself. In the town, the rain begins to clean the day before it has properly begun. It washes the refuse from the streets into the gutters, dilutes the smells of the tannery and the fishmonger's stall, gives the thatch a dark, saturated gleam. The first people to stir, the bakers, the water carriers, the shepherds driving their flocks out the gates, move through a world softened and subdued. Their conversations are hushed, their footsteps careful on the slick stones. The discovery of a rainy dawn is one of muted tones and lowered expectations. The market will be muddier, the travel slower, the light poorer for close work. But it also brings a kind of reprieve. There is an excuse to move more slowly, to stay indoors, to focus on tasks that do not require the sun. The world is not shouting today. It is whispering. A woman opens a shutter and breathes in the washed air, letting the damp cool her face. She sees the empty street, the steady rain, the gray sky. It is not a cheerful sight, but it is a clean one. She closes the shutter and turns back to her sleeping family, to the small, dry world of her home. The day will unfold at its own, rain-dictated pace. There is nothing to be done but to follow its lead. The leaden sky holds its rain in a perpetual, misting suspension, neither pouring nor ceasing. It is a day without shadows, where every surface, stone, wood, thatch, wears a slick, dark patina. The world seems to breathe water. In the courtyard of the Lord's castle, a training session for the younger squires is conducted under a dripping awning. The clash of wooden practice swords is a dull, wet thock, lacking the bright ring of steel on steel. The master-at-arms, a man whose face is a topography of old scars, barks corrections that hang in the moist air. The boys' movements are sluggish, their feet unsure on the sodden ground. Their discovery is the difference between the ideal of combat, the clean lines, the decisive blows depicted in tapestries, and its muddy, graceless reality. Slipping, fatigue, the chill that seizes the muscles, the way rain finds the gap between helm and gorget to run an icy finger down the spine. One boy falls hard, landing in a puddle with a splash. He lies there for a second, breath knocked out, humiliation hot on his face. The master-at-arms does not offer a hand. The ground is always there, he says, his voice flat. Enemies are not courteous. Get up. The boy scrambles up, dripping and shamed. The discovery is brutal but essential. Violence is a condition of the physical world, subject to mud, bad weather, and error. There is no poetry in it, only mechanics and pain. In the monastery's herb garden, the monk in charge of the infirmary moves between the raised beds under a broad, oiled hat. The rain is a blessing here. He examines the leaves of feverfew, the spikes of lavender, the low, spreading mats of thyme. They are vibrant, swollen with moisture. He pinches a leaf of sage and crushes it, releasing its pungent, camphor scent, a tiny defiance of the damp. His discovery is the patient intelligence of plants. They do not struggle against the rain. They incorporate it. They turn water into leaf, into flower, into the essential oils that will later calm a fever or cleanse a wound. His relationship with them is one of custodianship. He knows which herbs crave the sun and which tolerate the shade, which roots need loose soil, which flowers must be picked at dawn. This knowledge is quiet, cumulative, passed from his predecessors' gnarled hands to his own. It exists outside of texts, in the color of a stem, the texture of a leaf, the taste of a sap. He gathers a basket of chamomile heads, their white petals bowed under the weight of tiny water droplets. Later, by the dry heat of the infirmary fire, they will be spread to dry, their summer sun essence preserved for the gray days of winter ague. The rain beads on his sleeves as he works, a cool, constant reminder of the cycle of giving and taking, of growth and harvest, that governs his silent, green charges. In a cramped scriptorium annex, a different kind of monk struggles. He is a copyist with poor eyesight, and the gloom of the rainy day forces him to bring his face perilously close to the parchment. The inkwell seems to drink the dull light, making it hard to judge the depth of black. His lines grow tentative, the letters losing their confident flourishes. He makes a mistake, a single dropped word in a psalm. He stares at it, a blot of failure in a sea of pious text. The rule is strict. Errors must be scraped away with a knife, the parchment made smooth again, but the scar always remains, a faint ghost beneath the new ink. His discovery is the humility of imperfection, the pursuit of flawless replication, of being a transparent conduit for the word, is constantly undermined by the frailties of the body, tired eyes, a trembling hand, a wandering mind. He puts down his pen and rubs his temples. The sound of the rain is a soft rebuke. It speaks of a world of fluid, effortless processes, while here he labors to freeze thought into immutable symbols. He takes up the scraping knife, its edge honed fine. The action is careful, penitential. He removes the error, leaving a pale, a braided patch. He will let it dry, then apply a new ground, and tomorrow, under better light, he will try again. The discovery is that devotion is often found not in the perfect line, but in the patient correction of the flawed one. At the wharves, the rain merges with the river, a ceaseless addition to the greater flow. Boats are tied up, their decks slick, their sails furled and dark with wet. The usual bustle is subdued. Men huddle under awnings, mending nets or splicing rope, their movements economical. The fishmonger's stall is shuttered. The discovery here is of enforced idleness, a rhythm dictated by the sky. There is a grudging acceptance. The river is too high and swift for safe fishing. The roads are mud that would swallow cartwheels to the axle. So they wait. They tell stories, exaggerated tales of storms survived, of monstrous fish lost, of prices got and prices given. They gamble with worn dice on a barrel top. The rain is a parenthesis in their lives, a time out of time. A young boatman, new to the trade, fidgets, and used to the stillness. An older man, his face a mask of wind-worn lines, watches him. "Sit," he says, not unkindly. The river teaches patience. It flows whether you work or not. Sometimes the work is to sit and listen to it. The young man sits, unconvinced, but slowly, as the older man says nothing more, just stares out at the gray water merging with the gray sky, the younger one begins to hear it. The complex music of the rain on the river, a sound like a million tiny fingers drumming, and beneath it, the deep, bass note of the current. It is a lesson in scale. His personal restlessness is insignificant against this vast, aqueous respiration. He discovers a kind of peace in irrelevance. In the house of the woman with the secret, the day is a cage of damp and worry. She went to the wise woman at first light. The old woman had probed the lump with fingers like knotted roots, her face unreadable. She prescribed a poultice of dried nettle and mallows, to be applied warm, and a tea of bitter herbs. "We will see," was all she said. "We will see." Now the woman moves through her chores with the poultice a warm, prickly presence beneath her dress, a constant, tactile reminder of the threat within. The smell of the herbs mixes with the smell of wet wool and the damp earth rising from the floor. Her children are restless, confined indoors. Their noise, which she usually tolerates, feels like an assault. She snaps at them, then immediately feels a wash of guilt. Her discovery is the isolation of fear. She carries a potential death inside her, and the life around her. Her children's squabbles, her husband's simple request for mended hose, rolls on, oblivious, a stream flowing past a stone. She cannot bridge the gap. To speak of it would make it more real, would alter the fragile equilibrium of their world. So she swallows the bitter tea and tends the fire and listens to the rain, feeling utterly alone in the crowded, damp little room. The lump is her silent companion, her private oracle of a future that has grown dark and uncertain. In the alley behind the tavern, a cat has given birth. She has found a dry niche between a stack of empty barrels and the stone wall. For tiny, blind creatures squirm against her, mewling faintly. She licks them clean with a rough, devoted tongue. The rain sheets off the edge of the tavern's roof a foot away, creating a curtain of water, but the niche is dry. Her discovery is the primal imperative of shelter and nurture. All complexity, the human dramas inside the tavern, the politics of the town, the theories of the scholars, is reduced to this, a warm, dry spot and the milk in her body. She hears the world through a veil of rain and instinct. A rat scuttles past, and her ears flatten, but she does not move. Her priority is absolute. The kitten's route, finding sustenance. She purrs, a deep, vibrating rumble that is as much about calming herself as it is about comforting them. Existence, for her, is this circle of warmth and need. The rain falls, the world turns, and in this dank alley, life, vulnerable and fierce, asserts its simple, overwhelming claim. The Lord, in his solar, meets with his marshal. A parchment map is spread on the table, weighted at the corners with daggers. It shows the borders of his lands and those of his neighbor. There is a dispute over a strip of woodland. The marshal, a pragmatic man, argues for a show of force. Send armed men to patrol the contested area, cut some of the neighbor's timber, assert de facto control. The Lord listens, tracing the inked line on the map with a finger. The rain streams down the window behind him, blurring the view of the courtyard. His discovery is the calculus of provocation. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, not in the realm of physics, but in the realm of pride and arms. A small incursion could lead to a skirmish to a feud to open war, draining his coffers and costing the lives of men who are also taxpayers and farmers. He thinks of his son, sleeping peacefully after his nightmare. He thinks of the quiet, prosperous continuity of his line. No, he says finally, his voice quiet. Send a messenger. Request a parley after the harvest. We will drink his wine, and he will drink mine, and we will find a line we can both pretend was always there. The marshal's jaw tightens, but he nods. He is a man of action. This is a world of talk. The Lord's discovery is that true power often resides in the refusal to use it, in the patience to let time and negotiation wear down a problem instead of force. It is a less satisfying discovery than a victory in the field, but a more durable one. He rolls up the map the dispute contained, for now in a cylinder of vellum. As the day bleeds into a wet, early twilight, the charcoal burner emerges from his hut. The rain has softened to a drizzle. The mound is cool to the touch. Using a wooden shovel, he begins the careful work of excavation. He breaks open the earthen shell. Inside, the world is transformed. The stacked wood is gone. In its place are piles of perfect, jet-black charcoal, light as bone, ringing with a crystalline sound when struck. The discovery, as he lifts the first piece, is one of profound and simple satisfaction. The long vigil, the smoke, the rain, the isolation, all are redeemed in this tangible result. He fills a sack, the charcoal pieces clinking together musically. This is wealth of a kind. It will heat the forges of the blacksmith, the homes of the wealthy, the ovens of the baker. It is potential energy captured in a porous, black lattice. He will take it to town tomorrow, trade it for salt, iron, cloth. For now, he sits on a stump, weary to his marrow, and looks at his handiwork. The forest is quiet, steaming gently in the aftermath of the rain. He is part of this quiet. He has taken from the forest and given back ash to the soil, and in between, he has created something useful. It is enough. The discovery is that a life can be built around such cycles, and that within them, there can be a deep, wordless meaning. In the town, lamps are lit early. Their glow a warm, fuzzy ball in each window, struggling against the pervasive damp. The streets are empty of all but necessity. The sound of the rain is now the dominant fact of the evening. It is a sound that pushes people inward, toward their hearths, their thoughts, their private worries and small comforts. The scholar lights his candle and stares at the page. The drip in the corner now a steady, companionable rhythm he has made his peace with. The sentries on the wall endure, their world shrunk to the feel of wet wool and the promise of relief. The young lovers, separated by the weather and watchful families, think of each other in the gloom, their desire a small, bright coal in the general dampness of existence. The alchemist measures powders in the light of his furnace, seeking a different kind of fire. The old charcoal burner's daughter sleeps again, the first sharp edge of grief blunted by exhaustion and the rain's somber lullaby. And the rain continues, an impartial baptism for the just and the unjust, the living and the dead, the discovered and the undiscovered. It falls on the castle and the cottage, on the fresh-turned earth of the grave being dug for tomorrow, on the vibrant leaves of the monk's herbs, on the slick cobbles of the empty market square. It erases distinctions, washes away the day's traces, and promises nothing but its own continuation. The night will be long and dark and wet, and then eventually it will stop. The world will emerge, dripping and changed in subtle ways, and the wheel of discovery, of pain, of love, of mundane truth and quiet desperation, will turn again, under a clearing or a clouded sky, by the light of a sun that, for now, remains a forgotten memory behind the endless, gray, patient rain.